chug, 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 chug,
Hello and welcome back to the Wizard Staff. I'm your host, Guy.
And I'm Blake.
And we are two drunk novices who like to talk about EDH. We drink and swear, so you've been warned. Please drink responsibly when you're talking about children's card games. Now, I'm sure that you've all been in a situation like this, where you have someone that you want to bring in to, your Friday night magics, your Thursday night magics, whatever it may be, but they don't know diddly squat about magic. So, what are you gonna do? How are you gonna bring them in? What do you do? It's kind of a hard thing to grasp when you're just starting out in trading card games in general. Well, today we have a very special guest, my friend Gio here, who started Magic recently, and we're gonna kind of talk with him and kind of go through some of those processes and what are some of the best tips for getting someone into Magic. So Gio, say hello.
Hello everybody, my name is Gio. I have been playing since the beginning of this year, before the world got a little weird with COVID.
You came in at a great time.
Yeah, I have about 8 months of experience, approximately, and still learning every day.
Awesome. Yeah, it is kind of weird that you came in January and then all of this happened, because I'm sure that didn't make things easier, because then we had to socially distance ourselves, and you can't play as many games as you can now.
Yeah, it's pretty unfortunate, especially when COVID first started and there was a lot of lockdowns. Then we had to sort of break our playgroup cycle, and it was a weird period. But luckily, you find a way around it. We ended up finding Untapped.in, which is a website that allows you to play online for free and use any cards. So it was really helpful for trying to at least maintain the habit of getting together and playing, even testing decks for future use, so that we can end up using it in person when we eventually went back to gathering again.
For sure. Alright, so you've been playing for about 8 months now. It's August. Do you have a favorite card that you've come across so far?
I don't know about favorite card, but as of late, I've had some pretty fun moments of my Rite of Replication that I've been using. So, for those of you that don't know, Rite of Replication, sorcery spell, where you copy a target creature, and if you kick it, by paying 5 extra mana, then you can copy 5 times. Obviously, you can't use it on a legendary creature because then they'll just fizzle out, right? But if you use it, there's a lot of good creatures out there with some stupid effects that will give you some interesting results.
For sure. I think Blake and I have always our dream has been to Rite of Replication on a Blightsteel Colossus with 6 of them.
Oh,
yeah.
Man. That's good.
Pick one up now, just because Double Masters reprinted him. So
yeah.
What's your favorite big boy?
The biggest thing that I've done is I've used Rite of Replication on this one card. Some cards I don't remember the name off the top of my head, but there's one card where when this creature attacks, target player or defending player basically cuts their deck in half. So I replicated that 5 times, and I brought my opponent down to 1 card.
Nice.
But with that 1 card, he won the game. Yeah, it's Fleece Follower. That 1 card, he won the game.
Yeah.
And it was
it's
so
a fish.
sad. Yeah.
Awesome. Alright, and this is a drinking podcast. What's your favorite kind of drink to have?
Honestly, a lot of people judge me when I say that my favorite drink is Four Loko Fruit Punch. Yeah, see, it's because a lot of people have these
stigma.
Yeah, it's a stigma. A lot of people have these, I don't know, whether it's bad memories, something of drinking it and then just getting totally faded immediately. But like when you think about it, for the value, it's so efficient. You get that 12% alcohol. They took out a lot of the energy drink components, so it's not the one that they originally do. So it tastes a little different. I personally have a very sugary palate for things, so me drinking that, it's a little more bearable than me drinking a beer, and it'll get me just as messed up, if that. So yeah, that's what I'm rolling with. Right now though, I'm drinking a mango white claw, and I'm sure that's popular enough. That also gets me a little bit of side eyes here and there, but whatever. I'm proud of it.
A little bit of white girl wasted.
Yeah, a little bit of white girl wasted.
Awesome. Blake, what are you drinking, just before we continue?
I am drinking an Icicle Brewing Company Boot Jack IPA. It's from Leavenworth, Washington. And it's actually weird. I've had numerous drinks on this podcast from Leavenworth, Washington. So now I'm just like, man, maybe I should really just go back there as an adult, because I've been there tons as a child, but I couldn't drink as a kid. So now I might actually enjoy it even more.
I have 3 drinks with me right here, not all alcoholic.
Aw, come on.
I have my coffee, my water, and then my Sea Quench Ale Session Sour from Dogfish Head. It's been one of my favorites recently. I had a late wake up, so yeah, I need the coffee and the water to sustain me while I drink alcohol through this podcast today. Alright, so enough about that. Let's kind of dive right in. So, you're starting a new game, Geo. Before playing Magic, did you play a card game beforehand? Which one? If not, what about Magic kind of drew you in instead? So,
in my senior year of high school, I had a little bit of a 3 to 4 month period where I got into playing Pokemon the card game. It was a little bit of fun for a short amount of time, but it got kind of old, and I wasn't really a fan of the system that they used for some reason, like the mana and the energy and how it played out. I don't remember exactly why, but I didn't end up continuing to play. There was too many coin flips and too many this and that 50-50s that I wasn't a fan of. I have played Hearthstone, which is not exactly a physical card game, more of an online card game, and I played that for a solid month straight, literally every day. So that was a good one, I'd say. That one I was totally fine with. But what ended up drawing me in about Magic is how many cards and how many effects there are. There's so many little dumb things that you can do in this game that some of them are kind of funny, some of them are kind of busted, broken, and it's the diversity in cards that drew me into the game. Literally anything. You can kill your own stuff and get a benefit out of it. You can bounce your own stuff off the board, bring it back, and yesterday I was playing against somebody that used Thassa, where you bounce your stuff off the board and then it comes back on your end step, and then you reactivate that stuff. There's just so many effects and triggers that you can do, and it really makes the game challenging, strategic, and at its core fun.
Yeah, I think there's about 20,000 individual cards in Magic, last I checked over. And so, did you not really find that level of uniqueness in Pokemon and Hearthstone? Is that overall one of the major factors you think that kind of pulled you to MTG?
I'd say Pokemon, yes. Lack of those factors. Hearthstone, there was a little more, especially now they have Discover and a bunch of stuff. At the time they didn't have Discover. Discover wasn't a thing. It wasn't a mechanic. So, yeah, I'd say that was definitely a factor.
And when you played when you played Pokemon, did you have a friend group system for support where you guys would play with each other, or was it kind of more just, oh, I see you have some Pokemon cards, I have some Pokemon cards, let's do a battle here, or you know how like in Magic we have our playgroup. Did you also have like a playgroup for Pokemon that could like keep you going?
Honestly, I would say no. Our play group was limited to what we did at lunchtime because we were in high school, and it was like I didn't have my own deck. I didn't own my own deck. I used their cards.
Oh, you borrowed someone else's?
Yes, I borrowed their decks because they taught me how to play against my will, so to speak. And I didn't own my own cards. I didn't want to go buy any cards because I think in actuality I didn't want to commit to the game because I was already unsure going into the game. So I borrowed their decks every time at lunch, and then we would play. And I took so many L's, took a W here and there, but in the end, it just wasn't for me. The play group, we literally, just played every other lunch cycle, I guess. And eventually, I ended up stop playing, and then, following that, like a domino effect. One other person stopped playing, and then we just dropped it. And then, honestly, we all just moved to Pokemon on Pokemon the game on like the 3DS and stuff. That was a little different, but as for the physical card game, for us, it sort of just dropped off this year.
I'm glad that you brought up that point where you used other people's cards, because I have listened to Mark Rosewater explain like how he gets people into Magic, and he always talks about like at the end of like the teaching session, he just gives them whatever cards that he taught them how to play, and that way they're able to like take it away with them, and it'll like keep their interest going. Whereas, if you're always having to borrow, you don't really feel like you're invested in it as much,
That is true. But, at current times, it can be very expensive to have your own decks. Especially if you're just starting. The market is, for some cards, as you guys know, the market's very random. Depending on the reprints, it raises, it drops. There's a lot of opportunity and there's a lot of lack of opportunity for cards. So, for new players getting into this game and learning about the player market, it is just insane. So oftentimes borrowing decks might be the way to go. I think when I started out, I didn't borrow any decks. I literally went to Target and I bought a Precon for 2019. I bought the Adla Palani Precon deck, and I just jumped into it because I had $40 at the time. So that was it for me. But, a lot of other people might not.
Blake, do you kind of want to give some of your perspectives transitioning? Because you and I both come from Yu-Gi-Oh! We've often talked about how we would just play that during lunch or like cross-country meets or during class sometimes, and we were very good students, just the best. But yeah, I want to talk about kind of your transition, because I feel like, we share some things, but also we'll probably have a little different perspective.
Sure. So, as you said, we grew up with Yu-Gi-Oh! And I think having done that and transitioning to Magic, it's kind of like a double-edged sword in that I learned a lot of useful trading card game like mechanics and skills and concepts, like card advantage and like the zones of the game and deck construction, these abstract concepts. But in some ways it also kind of held me back because I came in with certain preconceptions of how a particular card game worked. Like when I was trying to learn the mana system for the very first time, I was just like not getting it. I was like, what do you mean I have to tap lands? What is this? And then I also really struggled with certain facets of the gameplay, like how not all creatures have like basically haste and vigilance, and that creatures could tap sideways while being face up. I was like, what is this? It's not face down defense position? What? And I didn't really like, I also struggled with like the concept of I'm in Magic, I can just attack my opponent directly without having to destroy their board. What is this? So I had some certain like things that held me back because I was still kind of stuck in the Yu-Gi-Oh mindset. But overall, I would say, because I learned all those high-level abstract concepts early on while I was young, it overall was very beneficial for me. And it was a fairly seamless transition from one card game to the other.
Yeah, I agree with that, where, the basic fundamentals of all the card games really do help when you go from one to another. I think the stuff that was like really tricky is just that the sequencing of like triggers, static abilities, like, it wasn't until I learned what the stack was where I was able to then visually kind of like, understand like what happens when you're like playing a card.
Oh, come on, guy, you don't like chains? You don't like chains?
I bet you couldn't even explain chains to me, Blake.
I don't have the time and patience for that.
Okay. And if you don't know, chains is like I want to say equivalent in like Yu-Gi-Oh!
It's basically the equivalent.
Except I think you would go like bottom up instead of bottom down.
I
I don't even want to like really dive into it.
Neither do I.
Yeah. But okay. So, Geo, starting out, you're playing EDH. You're given 100 cards. And from my knowledge, this is like the largest deck size that at least is the minimum. What'd you think of that? Like, it's pretty big.
I fell in love with it immediately. And I'll tell you why.
Oh, wow.
I don't like Standard. When I learned to play Magic, Standard is full of so much cheese that it made me sick.
You lactose intolerant.
I hate cheese too.
And my friends told me about EDH Commander, and when they told me that all decks would have only one copy of each card, and it's a 100-card deck, I was overjoyed. So with the 100-card deck, you have, and I just looked up the math, you have a 1.10% chance of drawing a single individual card in your deck. Aside from, and that's like without you having 7-card. So you have a 1.10% chance of drawing that game-breaking, game-winning card that you have in your deck, that single win con that will just throw the whole game sideways. Okay. So that leaves tons of people with the opportunity to make so many plays, as well as diversifies each game that you play, since you have the 100-card deck. Each game, you might play different creatures, different spells, because personally, whenever we go through our games, I'd say we each run through maybe 30 cards max for our deck, unless we're just land drawing, or unless we're just drawing cards. But we go through 30 to 40 cards per deck, so that leaves at least half of the deck untouched. So the next game that we play, we might encounter cards that we didn't the first time, and then our play is going to be a little different. The way that we operate, the way that we think about what other people can do. So the 100-card deck is really beautiful, and it's helpful to all players alike, new and old players.
I'm glad that you have a very optimistic opinion about it, because when Blake sent me the dragon deck, he bought me the dragon deck to like get me started. I was kind of like, do I have to play with all these cards? Like, I really want to like take it down so I can like fit it in my hand reasonably well. But I think that was just because, in Yu-Gi-Oh, it's just smarter to play with like the minimum deck size, and that's like 40 cards versus 100. So it's like literally like 250%. So yeah, I didn't like holding my fingers out as much as that, but like now I'm like, yeah, this is fine, like it's easy. So I've learned to embrace it.
Definitely takes some getting used to.
I want to add to that, like, I had the exact same problem when I went from Yu-Gi-Oh to Magic. Like, 40 cards, now I'm holding 100. I gotta like spread my hands really wide. And then if you sleeve it, you're like, oh god, my hands. And then if you double sleeve it, you're just like, alright, I gotta two-hand this bitch. Like, this is big.
And I mean, when we say you spread our hands really wide, we only mean like add in another inch or like inch and a half. Like, it's not even like that physically laboring on us,
Be honest with me, as Yu-Gi-Oh players, did you guys ever think, even remotely think about getting the like, what is it called, the armband that they use in the show, where they put the cards on it? Yeah, the dual disc. You guys ever think about getting a dual disc? Not even, it doesn't have to even be for play, just for the meme.
No, I never went that full weeb.
when I was a child, yes, I had one. And
Oh my god, you did? I didn't know this.
And I played in college, and I had another friend, Ethan, who has been on this podcast before. And we tried to play with the dual discs, but I mean, our arms were just like too big at that point where like, you know, we kind of like held them, like the dual discs like near our arms, but we couldn't like actually put it on. But yeah, it was fun. I can't imagine like, you know, trying to shove 100 cards into the Yu-Gi-Oh! Dual disc now. Like, that'd be impossible. Alright. So, Gio, what was one of the hardest parts about learning Magic? And what helped you overcome that challenge? Do you read or listen to any primers, podcasts other than ours that you found to be very helpful on your journey?
So one of the hardest parts that I still struggle with on occasion, because there are so many cards that do so many different things, is learning interactions between cards. So it was kind of weird to learn that you have to take a lot of text literally in a lot of circumstances. And most of the times that I encounter a problem, my friends have taught me what to do, or quick Google search. But most of what I've probably learned in person or through trial and error. So it's a little weird, having to look at all the permanents on your board and make sure you remember every single one, because a lot of times if you throw something in, it'll trigger something, and it can be very easy to forget that, and then you lose out on a lot of opportunity, which has happened to me a lot.
Ristic study triggers.
When I first started, my friends gave me a little bit of leeway, and they would let me go back and do what I had to do. But now, since I'm more experienced, we have a rule where if you miss it, you miss it. It's gone. The opportunity is gone. If you didn't draw your card, or if you didn't put your trigger, your counter, whatever it may be, right? You didn't flip the top, whatever it may be, it's done. You lost your chance. It's your fault for not keeping track of your own board, and we're moving on. That's obviously a little more strict, but I feel like it makes the gameplay a little better. But yeah, that's probably one of the hardest parts. Another hardest part is just dealing with cards that I'm not familiar with. I'll tell you, the first time I got Cyclonic Rifted, I wanted to flip the table. I'm not going to lie to you. If you overload Cyclonic Rift me, man, it stings. Something about having my permanents bounced to my hand stings more than a board wipe of exiles and destruction. And Blake's over there laughing because I know Blake would use it, but it's one of those things that might be a little hard to learn. Especially, like, imagine coming from a game like Pokemon and playing Magic, where in Magic you can destroy and exile and bounce stuff back to your hand, and there's so many little keywords and interactions that you'll find on so many cards that's totally different than what you're used to, right? Stuff like that can be really challenging for new players. But if you have the will to learn, and if you have the mindset that you can eventually go from point A to B, where you will know all this stuff and you'll be just like everyone else, then, I mean, it's worth it. As for the podcasts or any other media, mainly I listen to the What's Your Staff podcast. To me, that's a very... I've listened to a lot of the segments on here, and there's a lot of good opinion, especially the one where you had recently you had Braden on to talk about EDH. I really enjoyed that. That gave a lot of insight, and I even learned about a couple new cards. So stuff like that. I really like what you guys do with the show. As for other media, I occasionally watch a Commander's Corner video here and there to learn about strategy for certain decks and certain commanders. But beyond that, not really much. I'm more of a in-person learner.
Learn it yourself.
Exactly. I'm more of a learn it myself. And that's what I've done in most cases with this game. And sometimes it's a little more tough than others. But you gotta sort of drag your feet through the mud to get to the other side. So it is what it is.
For sure. Questions to follow up on that. So the first being triggers, and when you have something enter the battlefield, and you set off a bunch of stuff. do you, as someone who was learning at the beginning and that would happen, did you find it more helpful for you to say, if I missed that trigger, it's on me, and I'm gonna, just need to do better about remembering that? Or would you prefer that you let your opponents and friends say, like, you're new and you're learning, I'll let you, like, go back if you missed that, like, a turn or two ago?
It was never more than one turn after, but I when I was first starting, I was a little more satisfied with my friends saying, hey, you're supposed to do that at this time, and you missed it. So let's do it now. I was way more satisfied with that, because I'd have, especially if I'm going to be using this deck over a long span of time, I would need to remember these combos, these triggers. So that was extremely helpful. Nowadays, or like I said, like maybe halfway through my current experience, I was content with, if I missed it, I gotta do better. If I missed it, the opportunity's gone. You know what? If I miss a chance to remove something or counter something that changes the game, it's on me. I have to pay more attention, and I have to be more aware of the board. And that's just a skill that, as a new player, you have to learn and develop to the best of your ability. So it's kind of one of those it is what it is type deals, where I'm sort of just gonna roll with it and take the punches.
Okay.
So I'll add on to this conversation, which is, or it's more helpful when getting new players into the game if it's their friends who are getting them in. Like, you cultivate a small play group and you're helping each other remember these triggers, remember these ETBs. Because once you start going to, say, a local game store or start playing online, you're playing with strangers, and strangers don't care about you as much. Like, they're not gonna be as friendly and be like, oh yeah, you forgot that trigger. Like, some strangers are really nice, but on average, it's more conducive if you get friends to get you into the game, because they're going to be more helpful and want to see you succeed in the long run.
I agree.
The other follow-up question that I had, and to kind of go back just another quick second, that is a great, use your friends as kind of like the stepping stones to get you to be a better player, like, for sure. I'm glad that, we all can help each other out learning this game, because it is quite difficult. But the other question I was going to have is, you were talking about all the different zones, like graveyard, exile zone, and that's kind of, hard to grasp as a new player. Have you come to the point where you have kind of started thinking about, like, a graveyard as another hand yet? Or do you know what I mean by that?
Yeah, I haven't, because I don't run a lot of decks and cards that will let me manipulate my graveyard to use it to my advantage. I don't really run much black, which, black does a lot of that graveyard manipulation. I have thought about making more of a black-oriented deck, with which I can do that. The only time I've ever done it is when I run Marin of Plan Noctel, I think that's her name.
Yeah.
When I run Marin, that's the only time that I've ever considered my graveyard a resource. But beyond that, I normally don't, because if something's in there, it's in there. I've had my graveyard exiled when I use Marin. I've had a lot of times where my cards are taken from my graveyard and my graveyard exiled, but I don't get my own use out of it. So it's a little unfortunate, but I do, I have realized that it can be a resource, just like your life total is a resource, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, your graveyard is a resource, and in some cases, even your opponent's hands are a resource. I'm looking at you, send triplets. But, yeah, I definitely am aware of that.
Okay. I mean, that was a concept that I think, especially in Yu-Gi-Oh!, and I think Blake would probably agree with me, you have, like, your hand, your extra deck, your graveyard, and the banished zone, which in Yu-Gi-Oh! It's actually really easy to, like, get stuff out of the banished zone, from what I remember.
Yeah, that's a joke. It's like the banished zone is basically the second graveyard.
Right. So, you just kind of, move pieces around the board. So it's really easy to kind of like come around to the fact of like, oh, you have access to everything. Magic, you don't have an extra deck, and Magic, there's 4 or 5 cards that really allow you to pull stuff out from exile when they're exiled like permanently. You can exile cards to put them there and then like, you know, cast them, like Praetor's Grasp, but typically they try to like say when this is exiled, it's exiled. So,
and I appreciate that, yeah, because otherwise it's just a second graveyard, and what's the fun?
Exactly.
So, have you acquired a lot of what would be considered the fundamental staples of EDH, like Soul Ring, Cultivate, Command Tower, and were these recommended to you for pickup or after playing games? Were you able to figure out what those were after like observing and seeing like, oh, that card comes up or that card is very helpful?
I have acquired a lot of them. You know, Soul Ring, for one, is one of those basic ones that it's essential in almost every deck. It's crazy the value that you get from it, especially if you get in your opening hand, and that's just one of those things that'll really set you ahead. Cultivate, Command Tower, all those cards. A lot of them were recommended to me. Some of them I found on my own through play. I have played a little bit with people outside of my play group on Untap, and I've seen some cards that were pretty interesting there that I could, you know, I might be able to consider kind of fundamental. I haven't acquired any of the tutors, which so many people seem to use in like every deck, but that's because they're so expensive. I know there's like 1 or 2 that's a little more affordable, but a lot of the really good ones with small CMCs and stuff are very expensive. And, you know, it kind of sucks that they are, but you know the market. But yeah, I'd say a lot of them were recommended to me by my play group. You know, I remember Guy, you were in the first game that I played. You're part of the original play group that I played with, so you guys ended up talking to me a lot about like when you play something, this is one of those cards that would be helpful or be useful to have in either this deck or every deck. So I'd say talk like that was very helpful to developing my skills as a player and my deck building, because even like now I still struggle with deck building a little bit, but just having that little bit of knowledge and those recommendations.
I know not everyone enjoys the facet of deck building, and I know some people can get a little bit snobbish about it, but you know, some people just want to like sit down and play a game. They don't want to think about deck construction, and I don't think anyone should be held against that. Precons are great. Just pick it up and play.
How many decks have you built from 0 to 100, Geo? And what I mean by that is just like, you started with nothing and then you had a deck. Like, how many decks have you fully constructed yourself?
So I have my Atla Palani deck, which was a precon, but at this point in time, I've replaced most of the cards with other cards. So I wouldn't say that's a 0 to 100. That's maybe like 20 to 100. Same thing. I have a Yannette Cryptic Sovereign, but that one, however, I'd say that's a little more like 10 to 100. I just recently got an Erixmathy, the Slumbering Isle deck, and that was pure 0 to 100. Like, I spent like 40 minutes constructing it, and then like hours testing it with my friend to see the plays that I would make before I purchased it. Obviously, you know, it's way helpful to know whether something will work or not, or something is efficient before you purchase the cards, because those can be expensive. But and then I have a Dragon deck that I'm finishing with the cards that should be coming in over this next week. So I'd say in total 2, and then the ones that I modified are also 2.
Okay. And going off of like, you know, you have your precons that you've edited and, you know, tweaked a bit. How did you go about picking the new cards that you would put in, and then how did you take some of those cards out?
I kind of, you know, laid them all on the table and weighed the value that they provide me and whether I could get better value out of it. A lot of the creatures I replaced in the decks for like way stronger ones, you know, higher CMCs that'll give me a little more of an advantage over my opponents. honestly, I just sit here for an hour with EDH Rec on and look over the cards that would be good and look over what I could replace. It's as simple as that. If I haven't found much use out of it before, or I don't see any play value through it with any strats that I have in my deck already, then it's not worth being in there. So, I've been told that you have to build a lot around a win con, and I've been trying to meet those win cons for a while. And that's what led me to revising I'm not to say that the precons are bad. The precon that I got was okay. The precons that came out for 2020 were great. Alright, the mutates and all that stuff, those decks were strong when they came out. Those were, I was kind of sad that I ended up getting the 2019 one instead of those ones. But, timing sucks. But yeah, I'd say EDH Rec has been my greatest asset to my deck building and my revisions to figuring out exactly what I need, and then I proceed to move to see how I would use it.
Because I kind of relate to you, where I was given a precon, and I played with the precon as it was a few times, and then I watched some videos and read a few things about, this particular precon, here's some of the cards that we would take out, and then we would say you should throw in. And so I would do that, and then, I really just started to play around with it, and then eventually I was just like, I'm going to build my own deck now. And Blake, I know that you've kind of talked about, you went on to the Gatherer, you were told to find a legendary creature, and you found Una.
Yes.
But then, how did you go about building your first deck?
Well, off of that, I'd like to say, both Guy and you, Gio, that you started with precons, and I'd like to just say my story, which is the other way of doing it, which is being told, hey, just go on Gatherer, look at all the legendary creatures, all the cards that can be your commander, and find one that speaks to you. And so that's what I did. I just scrolled through for a couple of hours because I was very slow, and I'm like, what the hell does this do? What the hell does that do? And I eventually came upon Una, Queen of the Fae, and I'm like, that's it. That's the card I love. That's the card I want to build a deck around. And that's how I built a deck. So I didn't have a precon. I truly just built a deck from scratch. And needless to say, it wasn't that good, that well focused and effective at what it wanted to do, but it kind of did. It revolved around an idea, and that's how I got into starting to deck build. I've kind of, from the ground running, always been used to the idea of building your own decks. I'm not trying to say that precons are bad. In fact, I think precons are great. I'm just saying that that's a different style of getting someone into the game.
I think that a lot of new people should start with precon, and I'd say arguably not build their own deck from the jump, because starting with precon, those precons are filled with the basic ideas of Magic, and how cards interact with each other. So that's precons are almost like the training wheels that you need to learn to ride your bike.
Yeah, I basically started riding a bike without any training wheels, and I scraped my knees a lot. So
you take a lot of falls.
Yeah, I learned from it, and I'm like, man, I don't want to scrape my knees anymore. I should really learn how to ride this fucking bike.
Yeah, I think that eventually, players shouldn't really stick with the precons for too long. So precons are really good at the start, and then once they're confident enough, they can take time to construct their own deck and then proceed to play it. And it's a different feeling when you win with a precon versus when you win with your own deck. When you win with precon, it's nice because it's a victory nonetheless, but it's a victory that was built for you versus a victory that you have built yourself.
Yeah, and I would also, just to kind of add on to precons, but you may have a fun time playing with precons, and they could kind of keep up. But if you're also playing with a play group who tends to just build their own decks, I feel the precons are only going to get you so far. They're never going to actually get you to a point where you win the game. It's just going to be very casual for you while you play. So that's just kind of my 2 cents there. And I do agree, precons are the training wheels. I think once you kind of understand all the fundamentals of Magic, that's when you can then, take off the training wheels, or, start throwing in your own cards into the pre-con. And then once you really kind of understand those interactions, build your own deck then.
I definitely agree with that. And if to any new people that are listening, or any people that have new friends, just let them know that while the player market can be very scary with the cost of cards, building your own deck can be very difficult. But you have good resources such as a Commander's Quarter that will give you, that's a podcast on YouTube and Apple Music and all that stuff. And they give a lot of budget decks. So even, you don't need the strongest deck that costs like $1,000 with like all these huge big boy creatures that'll destroy everyone else's permanents when they come out, or you have Annihilator, or this and that, right? There's a ton of budget cards that you can actually get and still work around a certain strategy or win con to win. You don't need the strongest deck at all times. So just think about that. There's always opportunity for you to build a deck, whether it is $20, $35, $50. If you have a little more money and you're more invested, $100 or up. But just do what you feel comfortable with, and just don't sit with that pre-con for too long. You want to... I say it's crucial to your development as a player to eventually build your own deck.
To add on to that, I will just say that no matter what power level of EDH you are playing, there are some content creators out there who have made budget decks that you can go watch and learn about. So there's always resources out there. I would like to ask the next question, which is, if you were to start over again, what would you want to do differently to help sort of like ease the transition into Magic?
If I were to start over again, I would do more research on the possible commanders that I would be able to grab out of the precons, because while I'm okay with Atla, I feel like I could have grabbed a different one that might have been a little better, or I could have worked around a different strat. Because at the time, the Atla precon deck doesn't really come with many sack outlets. So you're just sitting there the whole game making eggs over and over and over. Worst comes to worst, your opponent has flyers, and they just totally ignore that. And they swing at you all game, and then your whole strat is just down the toilet.
Looking at you, guy.
Huh? What? Huh? What? Me?
But yeah, I wish I would have done a little more research on what I could have started with, and maybe where I'm at right now would be a little different. But beyond that, I wouldn't change much. When I started playing, I used MTG Arena to learn the fundamentals of the game, and I picked that up really quickly because it's a very flashy game. I love that about it, and the tutorial was pretty informational, and you get a lot of experience on that. Even though they're standard games, you still get the fundamentals that you'll need for EDH. So I didn't really need too many other resources to develop my skills at EDH. If there were one thing I would do differently, which is not particularly related to my development as a player and easing my transition, is around the first or second month of the time when I started playing, I bought an M20 booster box. And I didn't listen to my friends when they told me buy singles. I wanted to buy a box because there's something there's this weird thing in me that I like to do where if I'm doing something, if there's an option to do it a traditional way, for some reason I like to do it at least once, right? So you think about old Magic before this huge market was a thing. You buy a pack, you crack it open, you look at what you got, and then hey, if you eventually go to a game store, eventually if you end up finding somebody that has different cards, it's a trading card game. You work out some trades, stuff like that, right?
Yeah.
And then you have like opening big booster boxes. You get so many cards, and a chance of you're taking a little bit of a gamble. You get a chance of rares, rare mythics, a bunch of foils, this and that. Now I got the M21. The M21 was kind of butt. Alright. I wish if I had done more research or just asked somebody, in a heartbeat I would have grabbed Theros for a chance of getting a lot of those indestructible gods. that's the one thing I wish I would have done differently. And to this day, I'm still like, when I think about it, it's just so frustrating that I didn't at least look up the contents of all the boxes before I made that spur of the moment decision.
So as you become more into this game, like, have you transitioned more towards buying singles and less the risk of buying boosters and boxes?
Yeah, as it stands, I only buy singles. I'm a little more strict on myself with that. I'd say off that first box that I bought, I do have a lot of little minions, little pack filler minions that would, probably do something in standard. If I played standard, I might be able to work something with them with what little power and toughness that they had, the little effects. But as it stands, I have no more need for any of those excessive amounts of cards. Number one, I don't have the space. Number two, I just don't want to go through that experience again. I'd much rather spend most of my money that I've been spending. I've spent so much money already, and it's only been 8 months. But I'd rather spend all this money on
Welcome to the club. Woo woo.
Man, I'd rather spend all this money on these singles that'll get me a little farther than buying boxes. If they were to release a full set of rares, which is inconceivable, but if they were to, so how they're doing double masks and they're doubling the rares.
Yeah.
If they and chance of rare mythics, if they came out with a box that was just uncommons and rares, I might consider buying that. But the value on that, depending on what the contents of the box would be, might be a little bit absurd. So I'd say that would make me consider buying a box again, but beyond that, there's not really much that gets me going. I thought about buying double masters, but I quickly realized that it's not the move.
Yeah, I know, just to draw more comparisons to Yu-Gi-Oh!, they do stuff in that game where they make smaller packs and will have it be 5 rare cards and that's it. But in Magic, they tend to cater their packs to always be draftable, so it would be kind of hard for them to just make a full rare set. And there's also other formats that are dependent on what rarity you can use, so it gets a little tricky there. But hopefully they just continue what they've been doing this year, and is just recognize what cards need reprinted, and we'll just reprint them so that they do become an affordable price. Blake, do you have any additional thoughts before we move on to our next section?
Yeah, if you start to get into Magic, just buy singles. It is a much more efficient use of your money. Also, if you plan to be playing this game in, say, 5 years or more, I would really advise you to start investing in mana sources, such as the best mana rocks, the best mana dorks, the best lands. I think that is one thing I wish I had done, and I did to some extent, but once you have those, you can literally build almost any deck in the Commander format. And so mana sources are just one of the key parts of Magic the Gathering next to card advantage, but there are so many different and varied forms of card advantage that depend on the decks that you build, that I didn't want to start with that. I wanted to start with the mana sources, because no matter what archetype you're doing, no matter what deck idea you're doing, a lot of them use almost the same mana sources, the same lands, the same mana dorks, the same mana rocks. So if you plan to be playing that long for this game, I recommend that. Take that with a grain of salt, but that's what I'd say.
Alright, and I agree. They're the one type of card that'll go, well, all types of cards go in every deck, but they're the ones that are most interchangeable throughout each deck, so yeah, they're pretty important.
I almost wish that there were mana rocks for each color to really help with a lot of the ramp problems, so
I mean, each color gets signets.
Yeah, but signets only go so far. I'm talking about like, you know how we have the elves that'll tap for a mana. They need to come out with a little baby demon that'll tap for a black mana, or you know, a little young angel.
You're talking about color bends.
Man, I don't know. That sounds more like color breaks to me. Because green, yeah, I definitely see, like, you know, green does have access to those kind of things, but where it has access to those things, it lacks in other things. So it seems balanced. In at least EDH, I guess, it does kind of suck for some, like white, especially, just because white was kind of created with the one-on-one format in mind. So a lot of its strengths don't translate well to EDH, but you know, hopefully
we're not going to descend into this conversation.
We haven't had enough to drink yet. All right. So bringing new people in. So Gio, how did Fabian get you to play Magic? Did he say anything specific that like caught your attention and made you interested?
I'll tell you exactly what happened, word for word. We're on Discord and he says, "Hey Gio, we play a card game called Magic every Thursday. It's not that hard. You know, it's really easy to learn. You can learn through the MTG Arena app, which will teach you the basics of how to play."
He said it's not that hard?
Yeah, he said it's not that hard. He said, "We need one to fill in as a fourth. Do you want to come?" And then that's it. I said, "You know what? Sure, why not?" Nothing going on at the time. I was unemployed because I was just about to start school, and I definitely welcomed the hobby that very soon became my obsession. And yeah, that next Thursday, I ended up going to Target the day before, grabbing the Atlas deck, and then the next Thursday I went to his house, and there I met you, Guy, and then we played our first game. It was as simple as that. I was very open to learning this game, even though there was in the back of my mind some little voice up talking about the typical stigma. Oh, nerd game, blah blah blah. It's not a nerd game. Come on, it's a fantastic strategy game. It's an open world. It's so much more than that. So I'm so glad I gave it a try, and never turn it back.
Did you find learning through MTG Arena initially to be a good way of learning how to play? And then what was your perspective of when it shifted from 1v1 to 1v3?
MTG Arena was the greatest tool that I've used to learn how to play. I'd recommend any new player playing MTG Arena a lot. You know, go through, you use the decks they give you on there. They have pre-constructed decks as well. Those give you the basics. Then you can make your own decks. If any of you have played Hearthstone or anything like that, it's just the same way. You can craft cards, you can do all this stuff. Make your own decks, play with them. Although it is standard, you do learn a ton. And when I started playing EDH, after learning through MTG Arena for the 1v1 format, my tracking of players really had to open up. You know, it was so difficult at first because instead of looking at one person's board, I had to look at Guy's board, I had to look at Fabian's board, I had to look at the other person's board, and there's so many cards that will enter the battlefield that I just, number one, I didn't know about. Number two, I had to consistently read over and over to remember the effects in case I played something that interacted with that. It was very tough, very challenging, but with experience, it gets way easier. So at the start, it's a bumpy road, you know, but very worth it in the end once you learn, like, start becoming more intermediate at playing.
And I mean, I know part of your answer will be, you know, your playgroup was some of the coolest guys you've ever met, but what else about Magic has been able to keep you coming back where Pokemon kind of failed you?
Ooh, that is a good question. I'd say number one, the discovery of new cards, because I see something that I think would be interesting and fun, and I like it. You know, like, for example, one of the newer commanders out of the more recent sets is Rin and Seri. You create a bunch of dog and cat tokens, and then you basically ping everyone for damage for them. And that, to me, is a bit of a meme, but it sounds fun, right? So the more fun that cards sound, the more I am enticed to keep playing for the chance that maybe one day I'll jump into that and I'll use it. It's all about the fun value for me. If I feel like I'm getting a ton out of it and we're having a lot of replayability, then I will stick with it wholeheartedly as I have. And number two, it would be the vibe that I get playing Magic. You know, Magic is more than just a card game. It's an excuse almost for you to get your friends together, you chill out, you have a beer or two, play some Magic, right? So it really helps you develop these relationships, these bonds with people. Some that you may not know, some that you may know or be close with, and keep a consistent culture of getting together, playing, and then having these funny moments, maybe these angry moments, you know, whatever it may be. But that really has kept me playing through and through. And I have even partnered with my friend Fabian to get somebody else to join us in playing, and then he was a new player, and then in him I saw myself, everything that I went through, and now he's at a point where he doesn't even have to ask questions. He just plays like me, and then we play together, all four of us, and we have a great time. And it's stuff like that.
So you're telling me you've only been playing 8 months, you've gotten somebody else into the game, and you're already like, I remember when I was like that.
Hell yeah! I tell you, man, it's crazy how far we've come. It's crazy how far to look back. Like, I can imagine you guys. If you guys look back at early Magic Guy, early Magic Blake, you know, what would you think right now?
I'd slap him.
They're noobs.
I'd slap Blake. Sorry, I'd slap early Blake. I wouldn't slap early Guy. That's me.
But like, it's just crazy to think how much we've progressed, right?
Yes.
But yeah, that has definitely kept me in, and at this point, I spent so much money that I don't think I'll be going anywhere anytime soon.
Yeah, that is kind of the nice thing is, at least for me, the thing is like, you know, I am spending a lot of this money, so I do want to be invested in the game, but I'm also trying to be smart about it and like buy the cards that I know will retain their value. It's like a lot of the reserve list cards that I'm looking at, like, you know, if I buy it now, it's going to be cheaper now than in like 2 years when, you know, the price will inevitably go up a little bit. And when I'm done with the game, I can then sell those cards and, you know, keep a majority of my money. Like bonds or stocks or whatever. And, okay. So then the last thing before we kind of conclude is, what was one of the more helpful things your playgroup did to help you get to understand how to play the game?
So as I referenced earlier with the triggers, where if I missed one, they would backtrack real quick. Let me play it out. Stuff like that. That was probably the most helpful thing. Was they didn't just let it pass, right? They for the sake of smashing me or doing whatever. They if I made a misplay, they'd walk me through why I did it incorrectly and what would have been a better decision. No one got mad at me for doing something dumb. No one absolutely blew me up because I was a noob in the group. They gave me time to learn, right? Like I said, I was playing Atlas. I was making an Exile game. That's literally all I was doing. I wasn't hurting nobody. I wasn't doing nothing. And they would just let me do it. And if I had another follow-up, they would show me how to do it, show me the timing about it. And it's really like, back to the bike analogy. The pre-con deck was training wheels, and my play group was the parent holding their hand on my back to push me forward, right? Trying to prevent me from falling or doing all this dumb stuff. So that was very helpful. I'm very grateful for that. You know, you too, Guy, everything that you did at that time to walk me through the right things to do and when to do them. I'm very appreciative, and for as long as I play Magic, you know, that original play group will have a special place in my heart.
Blake, do you have anything that you want to add on to, you know, how your initial play group kind of got you to teach you Magic and how to understand how to play?
Yeah, it's basically the exact same thing that you just said, Gio, which is my play group of friends was very patient with me. And, like, for example, coming from Yu-Gi-Oh!, I was like, all right, slam down this creature, go to combat, swing in. And they're like, it doesn't have haste. I'm like, fuck. And then they're also like, it has to tap. You can't then use it as a blocker for your next turn. And I'm like, double fuck. And so I did that, like, I kid you not, like 6 turns in a row, and I'm just like, I'm so bad at this game. But like, they were patient enough with me, and they didn't give me too much shit. They gave me shit, but they didn't give me too much shit. And like, I eventually learned after multiple games. The one other thing I want to add to this is the fact that Mark Rosewater, the like lead designer of Magic the Gathering at this time, says that you shouldn't overload new players with info and rules. Just teach them the very minimum basics, and as problems come up, then tell them things, but try and keep it as simple as possible. And to like the recommendation is to kind of like, as you're teaching someone, pull your punches so that they likely will win their first few games, so that they get that fun and positive experience, so that in the long run, like, okay, yeah, in the long run you can start being like, oh, this is how this actually works, and yeah, maybe beat them. But like, you got to have that first positive set of experiences to get them into the game. Because if you just like absolutely crush them and demolish them with like your really tuned deck, it's like, dude, what's the fucking point? Like, they're not gonna have a fun time, man.
Yeah. I'm a little jealous because, like, I kind of realize now that, Blake, you had a playgroup, and Gio, you had me and Fabian and Jesse, but I didn't really have, like, a playgroup per se. I had Blake, who I would talk on the phone with, and he would explain things to me. And I also had Ethan, who was getting into the game with me at the same time. But it was just me and him. So it wasn't like, we had a designated night every week where we were able to play. We would kind of have to go out of our way to, continue playing, which I think made it difficult for me at the start.
So, Guy, from what I remember from my perspective, it's like, I got you this pre-con, it got you interested, and like, but you didn't really have anyone to play with, so you were really hanging on by like a thread, and then one day you decided to go to a local game store, and you just happened to get really lucky where you found people that you really liked, and then you started playing with them consistently, and that's what really got you into the game.
Well, at that point, that was when I moved to San Francisco, and I was able to like find Jesse, Fabian, and Hector. And that's like a 1.5 to 2 years of playing the game at that point. So yeah, hanging on by a thread, but like there were like months at a time where it was kind of hard for me to just play a game. I didn't try and use some of the resources that Gio's mentioned, like Untappin' or having a Mac. I can't even really, well, now I can, but at the time I couldn't play like Arena to even like play any games of Magic. So it was kind of actually difficult for me. And like now, even I'm kind of back in the same position, being in Los Angeles and in a pandemic, having to stay home. I don't have too many ways of playing the game unless if I want to like hop in onto Untappin'. So yeah, not sure where I was going with all this, but I was just kind of like, painting a different picture of like, my perspective, I guess.
Yeah. How you started out and how it differed from having like a fake and stuff. Well, I mean, I definitely think that. I'm not really too familiar with game store culture. I've never really went. I jumped straight into a play group. But from what Fabian has told me, that you guys met at a game store and then you ended up joining the play group. I'm sure that there's gonna be. Hopefully, knock on wood, if sometime this year. We transition to a more downhill slope with COVID cases and then the pandemic, then maybe you could probably down there find a new play group or something of the sort. But we're always there for you on Untapped In. So YouTube, Blake, if you ever want to play, I mean, we'll jump straight into Untapped and I'll whoop you a little bit. But
oh, those are fighting words. All right.
I'll teach Blake how to use Untapped In here soon, so he can play some games with us.
Not to brag, but I did get a pretty mean expropriate off last night, so kind of riding that win. But yeah, like for any new player too, if you need a play group, or if you're interested but you're on the fence because you don't have a play group, by all means, like once everything opens up, eventually, go out there, put yourself out there, go to game stores, play a couple game or two. You might meet somebody that you end up taking a liking to, and then from then on it might be history.
All right. So closing thoughts, Gio. What's your hot ones take that you want to kind of tell the other new players of Magic the Gathering?
My message is to, if you are hesitant to get into Magic the Gathering, whether it's Standard or Commander, EDH, use your resources to your full advantage. You're not just walking down. You're not just walking through a forest by yourself with no torch or light or whatever it may be, right? You have EDH Rec, which gives you tons of good deck building and strategy for commanders. You have websites such as untapped.in that present you with the platform to actually test those decks before you purchase them in paper, so that you can get experience with it. And at its core, Magic is a social game. You use it as an opportunity to get some friends together, hang out, just have a good time, aside from the Magic, And then in the Magic, you have tons of funny moments, angry moments, tears, laughs, and it's a world full of opportunity, I'd say. And it's up to you on whether you want to take up that opportunity. But if you do, I guarantee you won't regret it. You won't regret it looking back.
I like that sales pitch.
Alright, so we are the Wizard Staff. You can find us on iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, YouTube, and anywhere else that you listen to your podcasts. On YouTube, make sure to hit the like and subscribe button. Helps out a bunch. You can follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at WizardStaff101. Or you can send us an email at thewizardstaff101@gmail.com if you want to bitch and complain about how stupid we are. So thank you very much for listening, and thank you again, Gio, for coming on tonight. And we hope you have a great evening.
Thank y'all for having me.
Peace.
Peace.